The air inside the box is already warm. It smells of foam padding and metal. Outside, a hotel corridor. Beyond that, Osaka. Beyond that, a justice system with a 99.4% conviction rate that has spent the last year constructing a case it believes is airtight. The man curled inside the equipment case is 65 years old, 5 feet 6 inches tall, and, until 14 months ago, was simultaneously the CEO of Nissan, Renault, and Mitsubishi. The box is sealed. The jet is waiting. In 24 hours, he will be standing in Beirut. Japan will never touch him again. The question is not how he did it. The question is what kind of system makes a man choose a box. To understand the box, you have to start with the debt. In March 1999, Nissan Motor Company was carrying 2 trillion yen in interest-bearing obligations, $17.6 billion at the time. The company had posted losses in 7 of the previous 8 years. Its global market share had eroded to 4.9%. Factories sat underused. Suppliers were owed money the company didn't have. Bankruptcy was not a hypothetical. It was a schedule. French automaker Renault saw an opportunity in the wreckage. It acquired a 36.8% controlling stake in Nissan for approximately $5.4 billion. A bet many analysts called reckless. And then Renault did something that no one inside Nissan expected. It sent someone from outside Japan, outside the automotive establishment, outside every assumption Nissan had about how its next chapter would be written. The man they sent spoke no Japanese. He had never run a company of this size. And he had absolutely no interest in the traditions that had brought Nissan to the edge of collapse. Carlos Ghosn was born in Porto Velho, Brazil, in 1954, to a Lebanese father and French mother. He was raised in Beirut, educated in Paris at the elite École Polytechnique, and built his reputation at Michelin before joining Renault in 1996. His nickname at Renault was Le Cost Killer. Not a rumor, not a caricature, an earned title. He had cut costs at Michelin's North American operations without destroying them. He had done the same in Brazil. When he arrived in Tokyo in 1999 as Nissan's new chief operating officer, Japanese executives briefed him on the company's culture, its traditions, its supplier relationships. He listened. Then he implemented the Nissan Revival Plan. 5 factories closed. 21,000 jobs eliminated, 14% of the workforce. The Keiretsu system, the sacred web of cross-shareholdings that locked Japanese companies together in mutual obligation, dismantled. No foreign executive had ever attempted this in Japan. Most Japanese executives hadn't either. Within 12 months, Nissan posted a profit. The debt that had been $17.6 billion was cut nearly in half. The company that had been dying was alive, and the man who had done it was now famous. May 2001. Ghosn stands at a Tokyo press conference and says 3 words that run on front pages from Paris to New York. Nissan is back. The company has posted a $2.7 billion profit. Its best result in a decade. What happens next is not business news. It is a cultural phenomenon. A manga comic book series is published in Japan with Ghosn as the hero. He appears on the cover of Time magazine. He is invited to speak at the World Economic Forum, where the world's most powerful figures treat him as an equal they haven't caught up to yet. By 2005, Renault names him CEO while keeping his Nissan title. 2 of the world's top 10 automakers, run simultaneously by one person, something without precedent in the industry. In 2016, Mitsubishi Motors falls into crisis over a fuel efficiency scandal. Renault and Nissan swoop in. Ghosn takes the chairman's seat there too. He now oversees a 3-company alliance producing approximately 1 in every 9 cars sold anywhere on Earth. The most powerful auto executive alive, running an empire built from the ruins of a company most analysts had written off as unsalvageable. The question his success made impossible to ask until someone finally asked it. Power inside the Renault-Nissan alliance was never evenly distributed, and everyone knew it. Renault held 43% of Nissan. Nissan held 15% of Renault with zero voting rights. It was an alliance in name, a dependency in structure. Ghosn had floated the idea of a full merger before. A single, unified company. One board. One leadership. French shareholders, by definition, in effective control of what had once been Japan's second-largest automaker. For Renault, this made strategic sense. For the executives inside Nissan's Yokohama headquarters, it was not a business proposition. It was annexation. They had accepted Ghosn the rescuer, the outsider who arrived when there was no alternative, performed a miracle, and earned the right to lead. They would not accept Ghosn the architect of a merger that erased Nissan's independence. By 2018, Ghosn's plans for a deeper integration were advancing. A faction inside Nissan began meeting quietly. They needed a mechanism to remove him before the merger could proceed. They found one in the last place Ghosn would have thought to look. Haneda had been Ghosn's chief of staff, the man who managed his schedule, carried his agenda, sat in rooms that most Nissan executives never entered. In 2018, Haneda walked into Nissan's internal legal team with documentation. He claimed Ghosn had concealed compensation from Japan's financial services agency. Deferred payments, housing arrangements abroad, stock-linked benefits. Amounts, he alleged, that should have appeared in Nissan's official financial filings but didn't. The figure he presented, 5.2 billion yen, approximately $48 million, over 5 years. Haneda did not stop at the internal legal team. He contacted Japanese prosecutors directly. He didn't report a concern. He handed his boss to law enforcement. Simultaneously, Nissan CEO Hiroto Saikawa, the man Ghosn had personally chosen and mentored as his successor, was coordinating with prosecutors on the arrest logistics. When Japanese authorities boarded Ghosn's plane at Haneda Airport, they did not arrive by coincidence. They had been given a schedule, a target, and a case built by the men closest to him. Ghosn would later call it a coup. Whether that word is accurate depends entirely on who you believe. November 19, 2018. 5:30 in the afternoon. Carlos Ghosn's private jet lands at Tokyo's Haneda Airport. He has flown in from Beirut, expecting routine board meetings. Japanese prosecutors are already on the tarmac. They board the aircraft. Ghosn is escorted off. He is taken to the Tokyo Detention House, a facility where defendants are held for interrogation, where sessions can run hours without legal counsel present, where the expectation of cooperation is built into the physical and legal architecture of the place. He will not sleep in his own bed for 130 days. That same evening, Hiroto Saikawa stands before cameras at Nissan headquarters in Yokohama. "This is despicable behavior," he says. His voice carries what sounds like genuine hurt. He announces that he will immediately propose Ghosn's removal from the board. The board meeting occurs 3 days later. Ghosn is removed. Within a week, the man who had been the most powerful automotive executive on earth is sitting in a cell in Tokyo, denied bail, denied a trial date, denied most contact with the outside world. The speed of it, the arrest, the press conference, the board vote, did not suggest a company that had just discovered wrongdoing. It suggested a company that had been ready. Japan's criminal conviction rate is 99.4%. That is not a typo. Of every 100 people charged by Japanese prosecutors and brought to trial, 99.4 are convicted. In countries with adversarial legal systems, prosecutors must prove guilt to a jury. In Japan, prosecutors must decide whether to charge you at all, and they almost never charge unless they already know the outcome. Pretrial detention can last months without a trial date. Suspects are interrogated, often for hours each day, without their lawyers present. Defense attorneys are excluded from questioning sessions as a matter of standard procedure. Critics, including international human rights organizations, foreign governments, and several Japanese legal scholars, call this a system of hostage justice. Detain the accused long enough, under harsh enough conditions, and most defendants sign whatever they're handed. Ghosn spends 130 days in detention before he is granted his first bail. He is held in solitary, reportedly loses 20 pounds. He refuses to confess. His lawyers call the conditions inhumane. The Japanese government calls the process lawful. Both statements are true. What they don't tell you is that refusing to confess in Japan's system doesn't mean you win. It means you wait indefinitely for a trial that may never come. Each time Ghosn's legal team won a procedural point, prosecutors filed new charges. The original accusation, concealing 5.2 billion yen in compensation, was followed by a second charge, aggravated breach of trust. Prosecutors alleged that Ghosn had routed payments through a Nissan distributor in Oman, and that a portion of those payments ultimately flowed back to him personally. A third charge followed. Then the SEC entered from across the Pacific, settling charges that Nissan had omitted more than $140 million in planned retirement compensation from its U.S. financial disclosures. The number that had started at $48 million was now $140 million, depending on which jurisdiction was counting and which definition of compensation applied. Ghosn's position never changed. The deferred payments were real, conditional, board-approved, and had never been paid, which, he argued, meant they did not constitute compensation that required immediate disclosure. Nissan's position never changed either. The arrangements were secret, self-authorized, and illegal. The actual truth sits somewhere in the gap between those two positions, in the accounting rules of a country with compensation norms that differ substantially from those of the United States or France. It is a gap that a trial might have closed. There was never a trial. By autumn 2019, Ghosn has been on bail for several months, confined to a Tokyo townhouse. His passport is held by his lawyers under court order. He wears an ankle monitor. His phone and computer access are restricted. The trial date keeps shifting. His legal team estimates the proceedings could take years. At the end of those years, in a system with a 99.4% conviction rate, the probable outcome is not difficult to calculate. Through family contacts, Ghosn reaches Michael Taylor. Taylor is 60 years old, a graduate of the United States Army Special Forces, the Green Berets, who went on to build a career in high-risk private security after leaving the military. He had spent time in a Lebanese jail years earlier over an unrelated matter and came away with what he describes as a deep personal contempt for detention without due process. Taylor accepts the engagement. The fee is reported to be substantial. The plan that emerges is not a sophisticated intelligence operation with cutouts and encrypted communications. It is something simpler and more audacious. You hide the man in a box. Michael Taylor and his son Peter arrive in Osaka in the last days of December 2019. They bring audio equipment cases, the kind used by touring concert crews, unremarkable at airports, heavy by design. One case has been modified. Ventilation holes have been drilled into the sides at intervals that allow airflow but remain invisible at a glance. The interior dimensions accommodate a person of average height if they curl their knees upward. Carlos Ghosn is 5 feet 6 inches tall. On December 29, 2019, at a hotel in Osaka where he is staying under the pretense of a holiday visit to his family, Ghosn enters the box. The case is closed. Taylor and Peter move through the hotel with the equipment. They load it into a vehicle. The vehicle goes to the private aviation terminal at Kansai International Airport. A private jet has been chartered, Turkish registered, with a flight plan filed to Istanbul. At the time, Japanese regulations for private aviation required no passenger manifests. The cases go into the cargo hold. Japanese customs and airport security conduct their standard screening. The cargo is X-rayed. The equipment cases appear as expected on the scanner: dense objects, metal corners, standard profile. No one opens the box. The jet clears the runway. Ghosn breathes in the recycled air of an equipment case, somewhere above the Pacific, and waits. The jet refuels in Istanbul, then continues south. On January 8, 2020, Carlos Ghosn holds a press conference in Beirut. He is thinner than the photos from before his arrest. He is composed. He is, by every visible measure, at peace with what he has done. I am not escaping justice, he says. I am escaping injustice and political persecution. Lebanon holds Lebanese, French, and Brazilian citizenship. Lebanon has no extradition treaty with Japan. Japan issues an international arrest warrant. Interpol publishes a red notice, effectively a global alert asking law enforcement to locate and provisionally detain him. In the 190 countries that have extradition relationships with Japan, this would mean something. Lebanon is not among them. Ghosn is legally unreachable. The most wanted fugitive in Japanese corporate history is giving interviews in his Beirut living room, and there is nothing Japan can do about it except express displeasure through diplomatic channels that Lebanon can politely acknowledge and then ignore. Michael Taylor and his son Peter returned to the United States in January 2020, apparently believing that geographic distance and American jurisdiction protected them. It did not. Japan made an extradition request to the U.S. government, an extraordinary diplomatic escalation for a case involving a private individual, not a national security matter. The U.S. State Department reviewed the request. The U.S. courts reviewed the request. In April 2021, 15 months after the escape, the Taylors were extradited to Japan. Michael Taylor received a sentence of 2 years in a Tokyo prison. Peter Taylor received 20 months. In a New York Post interview published in August 2023, Michael Taylor said Carlos Ghosn owed him millions of dollars for the job and legal fees, and had not paid. The man who had been hidden in the box, who was now living freely in Beirut with a lawsuit pending against his former colleagues, had apparently not settled the invoice of the men who went to prison to give him his freedom. The liberators, it turned out, had been abandoned by the liberated. September 2019. 10 months after Ghosn's arrest. While Ghosn was still in Japanese custody fighting for bail, Hiroto Saikawa, the man who had stood before cameras calling Ghosn's behavior despicable, who had appeared visibly wounded at the press conference in Yokohama, is forced to resign as Nissan's CEO. The reason? An internal investigation has found that Saikawa received overpaid stock compensation through a share price optimization scheme. The mechanism was essentially the same type of arrangement that prosecutors were using to build their case against Ghosn. The amount? Approximately 47 million yen. Saikawa acknowledges the payment. He describes it as a system that was not right. He resigns. He is not charged. He is not prosecuted. He does not go to the Tokyo detention house. He does not spend 130 days in a cell. He retires quietly and disappears from public view. The justice system that had deployed its full machinery against Ghosn, that had filed 4 successive charges to ensure he could not walk free, determined that Saikawa's situation did not require any of that. The man who orchestrated the accusation was guilty of the same conduct, and the system simply looked away. Haneda, Ghosn's chief of staff, the man who collected the evidence and handed it to prosecutors, received immunity in exchange for his cooperation. He was not charged. He continues to work in the automotive industry. The 4 charges Japanese prosecutors assembled against Ghosn remain open. They cannot be tried without Ghosn's presence. They cannot be dropped without political embarrassment. They sit in a kind of permanent legal suspension, crimes alleged but never adjudicated, against a man who is simultaneously a convicted person in the eyes of Japan's diplomatic posture and an unconvicted person in the eyes of every court on earth. Ghosn lives in a Beirut mansion. He gives occasional interviews in which he maintains his innocence and describes what happened to him as a corporate coup disguised as legal process. He has filed a $1 billion lawsuit in Lebanon against 11 Nissan executives, including Haneda and others he holds responsible for his arrest. The lawsuit has not been resolved. It may never be resolved. The verdict that would answer the central question of this entire story, criminal, victim, or both, has not been delivered. It has been permanently deferred. Here is what remains. A man saved a company from bankruptcy, ran 3 of the world's largest automakers simultaneously, and was destroyed by the executives he had made successful. His chief accuser resigned for the same conduct. His liberators went to prison. The man who built the accusation received immunity. And the person at the center of it all sips coffee in Beirut, free, untried, unreachable, and still insisting the bill from his escape artist has not been paid. None of it is clean. None of it is resolved. The case that was supposed to show the world that Japanese corporate governance could police itself showed instead a system that can be weaponized by the people who operate it, and abandoned when the target of that weapon becomes inconvenient to pursue. The box at Osaka, the 3-foot audio case loaded into a private jet on December 29, 2019, is the image that defines this story. Not because the escape was clever, though it was, but because it reveals what power looks like when it collapses. Ugly, opportunistic, and immune to the justice it claims to dispense.